Welcome back, folks. So today, the topic at hand is Kali Demystified. For some of you who know about this channel, I have this channel of mine called Demystified. And if you find this kind of sessions interesting, feel free to subscribe. I pick on some of these, I cherry pick some of these topics and delve into them for some more understanding. So if, like I said, if you find it interesting, you can please subscribe to this. So this topic, Kali Demystified, we are going to try and understand some of the facets of this goddess Kali, uh, who she is, what she is, how she came to be, what she is, or what we know of as her. Now, there is a quite a typical portrayal of the Mother Kali, the goddess Kali, with several hands and a ferocious appearance. And there are several explanations as to why that is the case. And we are going to understand this manifestation of hers from one specific perspective. There are so many explanations to this, and there are so many books dedicated just for this one reason. Well, we are going to delve into it from one particular perspective. So, the mother herself, as such, she represents the supreme and absolute energy that runs through the universe. It is a she is the very fabric of this cosmos, of this creation. She is the eternal, omnipotent, inscrutable divine power that runs this creation and runs in and through this creation. She is everything that we, with our very limited intellects, can understand. And she is so much more. What the degree of vastness, the degree to which her persona spills is incomprehensible to a average or even a sharp intellect for that matter. And the reason for that is that we are accustomed, we are tuned, we are able to comprehend things based on a specific set of references, based on a specific frame of reference. And the mother god Kali, her very existence, her range of operation is so vast that it is not possible for us. So this the acceptance of this fact is in and of itself an important thing to understand. And we are going to see in further slides is only through her divine grace can we come to know what she is. But during such times, we notice that we have to leave our timid and puny intellectual abilities far behind. What we are going to do in this analysis is we are going to take up a relatively simplified image of Kali because, like I mentioned earlier, her form is super glorious. It is superhuman, it is divine, it has got several facets to it, but we are going to consider a relatively limited, but it will cover enough to give us an idea of where this thought process has come from. So at the bottom of this image, and you will find that in several of the representations of Kali, not all, but most of them have this Maha Kala. It's called Maha Kala that lies at the feet of the Mother Kali, and she is dancing on him. So what is this? Why is this the case? What is the idea behind this symbolism? So we are going to try and understand that. And it might appear to a casual viewer to be a relatively insignificant thing, but this is of extreme importance. This piece of this picture that is there. Mahakala, Kala typically represents time, but we are going to use this in a synonymous term to Mahakarana, which means the great cause. So why is it that the mother is dancing on the top of this Mahakarana? So when we look around us and we see this cosmos with its myriad objects and interactions, the innumerable interactions that take place between different objects, both emotionally and physically, psychologically, from a energy, matter, and force perspective. One thing that stands out is there is constant change that is there. The anything that we are able to perceive is also because of that. The aspect of change is such an important thing in our ability to comprehend things that without change we kind of put ourselves in a different dimension. We are going to see a little bit of that going forward. But the fact that when we look at a piece of wood and it looks like it's not moving. And if you ask a scientist, then he will use the kind of technology that they have, and he will be able to probe down and he will tell you that it is made up of molecules. And then he will go further and he will tell you it's made up of atoms. At one point in time, it was thought that atom is the smallest indivisible part of nature. But now we know that it has been broken down further, and you keep going on further and further and further. And what the question that comes up is, in this changing world, is there something that is unchanging? Is there something that is permanent? And so for that, we just I need to pause for a second. I had forgotten to start my timer, but I think we are about 5 minutes into this presentation. I'll try and see if I can not go above an hour. Nevertheless, so the aspect of change that is there, one has this curiosity. Is there something that does not change? And the answer is that there has got to be. It's we cannot have everything changing. Otherwise, there won't be any kind of concrete existence. So whatever we see, if we are able to see it, that means it exists. And the fact that it exists and the fact that it might be existing because of something changing inside of it. For instance, the electrons that go around the nucleus in an atom, they are moving. Even the molecules in a wood are moving, but we don't see it. When we see the wood, we think it's not moving, but it is. The wood is not moving on account of the atoms that make it up, within which things are moving. So if we keep traveling down this path, now as everybody, scientists are after that, philosophers are after that, poets are after that, everybody in one way or another is curious about this fact. And in terms of science, we can understand that science can go only so far. Maybe a day might come when they might be able to find this. At the moment, they have not been able to. But what is interesting is science has been able to get to a point where they have been able to declare that they will never be able to understand the ultimate unchangeable source based on which this entire creation can be explained. There are laws, there are theorems, there are ideas like Heisenberg's uncertainty principles and Pauli's exclusion principles, and there are so many names you can come up with, and we don't have to twist and turn things too much to appreciate or acknowledge the fact that there is a limitation. The limitation is very obvious that we are we are a slave to change. So unless something changes, we cannot even observe it. If nothing changes, it's difficult to observe and probably impossible to observe. And therefore, when we are in pursuit of an object that does not change, how do you see it? You will not be able to see it, at least not with the current set of instrumentation and apparatus that we are used to using. It will have to be done in a different way. Nevertheless, we can acknowledge the fact that there has to be some unchanging truth, some entity upon which the entire cosmos rests. It's one example in economics they give is when we are borrowing. So we go to a grocery shop and we buy something, a pound of vegetables, and we give our credit card, which is nothing but we are borrowing money. And we borrow that money by using the card because the card belongs to a company who vouches for this because they have got the money, but they in turn have borrowed the money from somebody else, and that somebody from somebody else. And so you keep on tracing that. Obviously, it cannot happen that there is no money at the end of this trail. Everybody is borrowing, and nobody is at some point there is no real money. That doesn't happen. We know that at the end of this trail there is real money. Not everybody is borrowing. Similarly, the existence that we see around, there is borrowed existence. A piece of wood borrows its existence from the molecules it's made up of, which borrow their existence from the atoms, and so on and so forth, till you come to a point where there is nothing but existence. And when we talk about existence, if it is possible for something to be broken down into smaller parts, that means that it depends on something else for existence. Now, as far as being able to scientifically prove that, we may or may not be able to prove that, but intellectually, we can definitely make the statement that this unchangeable truth, this unchangeable existence is the primary source of existence, and that this existence that is there, it cannot change. It is indestructible. Everything else sits on top of it. A block of ice melts into water and becomes water vapor. The form of that energy is changing. But all these three forms, they derive their existence from an unchangeable substratum, a bedrock of existence. They have all borrowed their existence from this entity, whatever it is called. So this bottom line entity is indestructible. Now, when we look at the earth, it is moving around the sun, and we think that the sun is stationary. But we know that the sun is not stationary. The sun is moving around something, and our galaxy is our nebulae, whatever, different stars, they are moving around. Today we know that there is a black hole called as Sagittarius A that sits at the center of our Milky Way. And maybe that is something that is unchanging, that is something that is, well, the fact of the matter is we cannot delve into it, we cannot understand it. What we are just statement that we are making is there is one substantial truth, undifferentiable existence, which lies at the bottom of entire creation, which cannot change. It cannot change. There is a bottom line existence like that. Okay. So we see that there is this existence, but for this existence to we see around us, the entire world that we see around, this world is under constant change, it's moving, we see that around. And then there is this unchangeable truth that we just discussed, which cannot change. So there is a notion of a static energy and a dynamic energy. Now we see what we are having here, or what we are missing. We have got clay here, and then we are seeing a pot. So we have got this clay, which is our unchanging existence, which it's unable to change. It's by virtue of the fact that it's permanent and its sheer core existence, it's unchangeable. It cannot change, because if it changes into what? Something else, right? We went over this. So that is there, but we see the pot. There is clay and there is pot. What is missing here is the energy, the intelligence, the element of an intelligent potter who has got this smartness, who has got all the necessary skills to take this clay and make pot out of this. So pot is the creation, and this clay. Now this example might seem inert. The clay might seem to not have life in it, but in the earlier cases that we saw, creation is teeming with life. It's brimful of life. So it is not just matter. It is also a life consciousness that is weaved alongside that in the entire creation. And that has taken place. So what is missing here? What is missing here is this supreme energy, this energy that the Mother Kali represents. She spun herself out from this unchangeable truth. The truth, the the substrate Maha Kala was unable, it did not have the capacity to create, and it dependent on something. And so the mother emerged from this ether as if, and she took upon herself this gargantuan task of pushing forth creation into existence. And while doing this, she had to have used, and remember, like I said earlier, that our intellects are can only grasp so much of what is divine Kali energy is, what the divine mother is. So this divine mother, she had to work with this unchanging, inscrutable existence energy to take it in its unmanifested form and manifest it into this cosmos, into this creation of which we are but a very small part. So the mother, she took this energy that was there, and in the process of creation, she had to, it might appear, be dependent on something like clay to take this raw material as if and churn out creation out of it. And that would make her omnipotence somewhat less, somewhat challenged. But what she did was something remarkable and fantastic. She laid her own being down in as the very fabric of this cosmos. See, the reason that she is a female divine entity is because the male principle cannot be or is not involved in creation. Even in the world that we see around, we know that it is a female from whose womb birth take place. And therefore, Kali, from her own self, using the inscrutable existence as its bedrock, she used her infinite power, her infinite energy to lay down the very core of this creation. The creation, we are going to see a little bit later, was dependent. When we say creation, there are different layers of creation that take place. When we we build a house, we there are steps we go through. We don't we think of building a house and it's there for that doesn't happen. There are steps that take place. So the first thing that we saw is Maha Kala, the the great cause required Kali in order to take the unmanifested existence and propel it into the existence of this creation of this cosmos. For that reason, Divine Mother came into being. To think of her as a entity that is bound by time is is incorrect. The the bedrock existence is called Mahakala, and the thing that gives it a dynamic existence is therefore called as Kali. So this is a complementary relation that you see between the Kala and the Kali. Kali is that which gives rise to creation, but in her creation, the creation involves anything and everything, including time. Therefore, we are going to move on to the next thing that one finds represented in her images, and that is the Mundamala. Munda is head, skull, however you may put it. That is what she is wearing. What does this symbolize? What does this indicate? That is what we are going to see in our next discussion. So this is how I have the Mundamala. It is how it might look like. There are so many ways in which different artists have been able to portray this particular Mundamala. Now, how does this fit into the creation that we discussed a bit earlier? We saw that this entity, this unmanifested energy, needed Kali in order to give birth to this creation. And the way this creation took place is not a something like a an average person and intellect might think about. That is not how it took place. And insofar as understanding that, in the world of science, in the world of physics, there is a there is a concept, there is a idea called as the singularity, where a number, for instance, divided by zero is undefined, or infinity itself is undefined. When you add infinity, when you add 10 to infinity, it is still infinity. When you subtract 10 from infinity, it is still infinity. You divide it. What it means is mathematically you can talk about these numbers, but practically what it is telling is that we don't know what is happening here. It is undefined. We are unable to understand what is happening, and therefore we cannot describe it. And that is what, when we say Mother Kali is infinite, it is indescribable. Our intellect do not have the capacity to understand it. Now, when she, when we understand how the creation that she unfolded with things that he had, and using herself as a part of this creation, she laid down the very groundwork on which this creation stands. And we are just going to see a couple of examples of this. So when we talk about objects, so this is the the clay maker, the pot maker, the potter. He takes the clay, and when he sets about creating the pot, so we see an object and we see a fruit. We don't even realize that we are imagining the space in which that fruit is. If there is this earth, this sun, this Milky Way, the entire cosmos, if there was no space, if there is no space, where will it? This question might sound a bit far-fetched, but it is a valid question nevertheless. Space needs to be there. So it's like we lay down. First, we lay down the infrastructure, we put down the roads, and then cars can run it in a similar fashion. There needs to be space. There needs to exist a medium for other things to exist in. That very medium, she was herself. She put her own being in the preparation of this medium. And so this entire space, just to give an understanding of how we are unable, we will not be able to understand the prowess of our creativity. Space as it is, we are unable to understand the vastness of it, the complexity of it. When I say space, everything like today, galaxies are being spun out of black holes. For them to live, it needs to first create space and then they live in it. And we can maybe somehow relate it to this idea that I'm talking about. But let's take a parallel analogy. We have these thoughts. I'm talking to you, they are listening. And thoughts are bobbing up and down in our mind. Where do they live? Just like there is a space, a physical space in which physical objects live, there is a mental space in which mental objects lives. And there is a dream space in which dreams lives. And we can only go so far as much as we know. This is, maybe somebody else might think of one other thing and we can say, that is the space that is required, this is the reference. But that our knowledge is nothing in this ocean of existence that the mother has spawned forth. Our knowledge is nothing. So she has spun up dimension after dimensions, and on these dimensions, and in these dimensions, in and through them, there is creation going on. And for us to know that this is one cycle of creation, this one cycle of creation where we can roughly understand that there is a starting point, there is a creation, there is preservation, and then there is destruction. But what happens at the end of this? It's called as kalpa. What happens at the end of this? Our intellect I keep saying this, they are unable to appreciate, comprehend this fact, but the mother spawns creation after creation, and that is what the skulls in this Mundamala represented. She has, she is giving rise, sustaining creation after creation after creation. And so this concept of time that is there, this concept of time is something that we have invented in a very rough way. We don't understand what time is. Time, when we say eternity, at the most we can think of a long time. But eternity is not that. Eternity, mm, we can come up with some words and try and explain this. But for somebody who is the very genesis of time, time itself is born out of her. How do you say that she created time and then she came into existence at a particular time? That is a ludicrous statement to make. It's a ridiculous statement to make. And therefore, for her, there is no beginning and there is no end. She is an infinite, she is the paramount principle on which this cosmos runs. And there is no beginning and end to her. As such, time, there are several ways in which one can look at time, but it is a sensation that we have that takes place in some relationship. So we have one thought. Time as such, in one of the definitions, is the distance between two thoughts. So we have one thought, and then after a while we get another thought, and that's when we have the sensation of time. Time as such doesn't exist. If these two thoughts were not different, we wouldn't know time. And this is a not a very difficult thing to grasp. We watch a movie and we are very engrossed in it. We like it. 2 hours, 3 hours are spent, and then when we come out of the movie, we think as if it just lasted for a very short time. And the reason for that is this continuity in thoughts that is there. And then something is going on for 10 minutes is super boring. And you find that the 10 hours is almost like 2 hours. This 10 minutes is almost like 2 hours. So we can relate to it. But the fact of the matter is that the mother has created all this creation, and these creations take place cycle after cycle. There is no end to it. There's no beginning, there is no end. And that is what this Mundamala represents, that the mother adorns in her neck. And we are only scratching the surface of this. There's a lot that one can get into the details, but we are trying to go through this as fast as we can. So the next thing we want to see is this this sword. It's called Khadga in her hand. So what does this signify? So the mother, she not only created this existence, but she planted this spark of life in us. And she also built in us this curiosity to appreciate and understand the immensity and the complexity of the force that she is. One understands that. And she has given us this common sense. She has given us this ability to have an idea that she exists. She is the one who is the primary driver of this entire cosmos. And so she has provided in us a means of being able to reach her. We cannot understand her. We make an error if we think that we will be able to take all the aspects of her and understand her. That will be making an error. What we have to do is we have to rise ourselves and slowly lose our individuality as we gradually start merging into our beings. And that process has been detailed out in several scriptures in several ways. And one of the ways that I have mentioned here is these chakras that are there, where the mother is represented in the form of a Kundalini Shakti. And the strength that a person has, an individual has, a man has, a woman has, that strength is a spark of Kali. So the potential that we have is as huge as her. It is only because of our limited we understanding, we have limited ourselves to this puny ego that is there, that we are not able to appreciate her magnitude. So when we try and follow the principles that she has laid out, that the scriptures are laid out, and we start doing this inquiry into who she is, and we start surrendering to her, then this Kundalini Shakti is set to move up through the different nerve centers that are there. Now, as I mentioned, I've been talking to referencing earlier that we are a very small part of this creation. So this process of looking at the mother's creation and sensing her existence, sensing her in and all around everything that we see, teaming her presence in everything. To and then with that, it's not just harshness, there is bliss, there is joy in knowing her existence like that. And in this process of realizing her, a number of obstacles come up. We tend to get distracted, drawn out into some silly, stupid things, and they might be small on a great scale, but for an individual, they come as mountains. We are not able to overcome some of our bad habits. We want to be in constant memory. We have to have this constant memory of it. Any topic we focus on it, we constantly in touch with it, and then it reveals itself. So similarly, to be in constant touch with the mother, there are obstacles that come up, and we are not going to go into it. There are several books which detail these out. The the main thing is that our entire life needs to be devoted for us to understand her glory and to eventually merge into her. There is a big difference between saying to bring her down to our level and take ourselves up to her level. There's a big difference between that. So when doing this exercise of exploration and to reach her state, or to be able to surrender to her completely, she this word that she yields, she helps us every step of the way. Only if we have that kind of strength in our devotion, she helps every step of the way. She will use her sword to cut, to attack any kind of distractions that come in our way towards realizing her. So she herself will stand, will come with us, will support us and help us through our journey, uplifting ourselves to this Sahasrara, which is the thousand petaled lotus in the brain, where we'll say freedom takes place. And that joy is indescribable. If time permits, we'll get more into that. So the next thing we want to see is this head. She holds a severed head in her hand. What does that signify? This is a very complicated topic. Well, not once we understand what we're talking about, then not the actual representation would be easy to understand. But what happens is that the mind is is conditioned to work in a certain set of reference tools. We cannot jump out of ourselves. If somebody is going to say, for next half an hour, don't think of yourself as the body, we are unable to do that. Or let leave behind this concept of time. It is a ridiculous proposition to make. How do you even make that statement that somebody coming with that very idea that we should think in terms outside of the box, as it's called? Now, you might say that one might think that we see something in a particular way, and then another person has a very different perspective of it. That's thinking out of the box. But what is implied here is when we follow the steps that the mother has laid down for us towards understanding her, we reach a point where most of the journey is covered. But at this point, unless we have the grace of the mother, we will not be able to jump over this last hurdle to free ourselves from the shackles of the mind, the way it thinks, to become free of that. What an experience it must be to become free of one's own mind. It's not a lunatic. We're not talking about a mad person here. This person has the mind no longer controls him. He has become one with the mother. That case, that last step that is there, this severed head is a representation of that final act, which again, unless the mother herself, through her infinite graciousness, steps in and cuts asunder these knots that bind us to this world. When that happens, then emancipation can be proclaimed of this puny self that we are. Okay, let's move on to the next symbol that is there. And this is the soft part of the mother. The if the light of the sun is harsh, the light of the moon is cool and soothing. So this is the other side of the mother where she is no longer that ferocious. She is the loving mother who is giving her devotee all the blessings that he needs. And this is not a devotee who is working with a very sharp intellect, but this is a devotee who is working with garlands in his hands with flowers. He comes and puts it around the mother's neck, and he has got his relationship of love with the mother. And she then blesses him, and through that path of love, she carries him so very carefully, so very delicately. She will take him up this very path, and she will take him to this land of joy and of bliss. That is the fourth section that we are looking at. There are so many other things that are there, but like I said, I wanted to keep this presentation or this session short, and I covered 4 aspects of the mother. There are several that are there, but I think these would give the listener enough an idea about how this one perspective, this one interpretation of why the mother came into being could be understood. Thanks for listening. And like I mentioned, you can, if you find this interesting, you can subscribe to my channel. I keep bringing such kind of topics on and off. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.